"This isn't a pharmacy, sweetheart." That's the line. The moment everything changed at LAX. The sentence that stopped time at gate 19 and made every person within earshot look up. Lana Graham, a veteran Delta flight attendant with 17 years of experience and a badge that shimmered like armor, had just tossed a child's asthma inhaler into the trash can beside her podium. Like it was garbage. Like it was nothing. 12-year-old Madison Cole stood frozen, her big brown eyes locked on that trash can, trying to process what just happened. Her lips parted, not in protest, but in panic. Because that inhaler wasn't just a prescription, it was her safety, her breath, her peace of mind. And now it was gone. The gate, packed with travelers heading to New York, went dead quiet. A man in a business suit lowered his phone. A mother clutched her toddler. A teenage girl started recording on TikTok and whispered, "Y'all, this lady just threw away a little black girl's medicine." And still, Madison didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She did something much more dangerous. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady, her breathing measured, but behind those calm movements was a storm building. Not just the wheeze in her lungs. Not just the injustice. It was the knowledge of who she was, and more importantly, who her father was. Lana scoffed. "Maybe try a gas station next time, honey. Don't pull stunts to get early boarding." A few people chuckled uncomfortably. Others turned away. But one man, 2 rows back, whispered to his wife, "I think they're gonna regret that." Because within seconds, Madison's single message was sent. And in under 4 minutes, the entire airport, from terminal staff to regional executives, was about to find out what happens when you mess with the daughter of Michael Cole, CEO of one of the most powerful financial firms in America. This wasn't just about medicine anymore. This was about dignity. And Delta Airlines had just thrown it in the trash. 12-year-old Madison Cole did not look like trouble. She looked like any other kid who had grown up learning how to navigate adult spaces. Polished, composed, intentional. Her hair was pulled into 2 tight, neat braids. Her navy blazer sat crisp against her white blouse. Her travel-size suitcase rolled quietly behind her, not a scuff on it. She didn't walk like a child playing grown-up. She walked like someone who had somewhere to be. Because she did. Her flight, Delta 1124 from Los Angeles to New York, was scheduled to board at 3:20 p.m. from Gate 19, one of the busiest terminals in LAX. She had flown alone before. Her father made sure she was trained for it. Not just how to pack, check in, and find her gate, but how to move through the world with confidence, especially as a young black girl in spaces that often questioned her right to exist. Madison was used to raised eyebrows. She was used to security asking, "Are you sure you're traveling alone?" Even with all her documentation. She was used to the double takes when she showed her first-class boarding pass. But she wasn't used to being humiliated. Not like this. That afternoon, LAX was buzzing. Business travelers in suits shuffled through emails. Families chased toddlers around food court tables. A group of teens in matching dance team jackets filmed TikToks near a vending machine. Gate 19 was packed. Flight 1124 was heading into the heart of Friday rush hour, with every seat booked, including the premium cabin. The tension was typical for a full flight. But for Madison, the tension started earlier, when she'd approached the Delta counter and politely asked to pre-board due to her asthma. She had done it exactly the way her father taught her. She introduced herself clearly, explained her medical need, and presented her prescription inhaler. And then came Lana. Lana Graham had worked the counter long enough to think she had seen every trick in the book. She didn't see Madison as a child trying to travel safely. She saw a challenge. A disruption. A kid who didn't look sick enough. What Lana didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Madison Cole wasn't just a name on a manifest. She was the daughter of a man who'd built an empire by making sure people who looked like his daughter would never have to beg for dignity. Not even at Gate 19. It started with the way Lana Graham reached for the inhaler. Not like it was medicine. Not like it was something important. But like it was something questionable. Something that needed closer inspection. She didn't ask permission. She simply extended her hand with a clipped gesture, and Madison, trying to follow every rule, placed the small blue inhaler in her palm. Lana held it like she had just picked it up off a public restroom floor. She turned it over slowly, scanning the label with exaggerated care. Her nose wrinkled. She shook it once, then again, like she expected it to rattle with something illegal. The label was clear. Madison Cole. Albuterol sulfate. Prescribed by Dr. Karen Ellis, Mount Sinai Hospital, New York. But Lana barely glanced at that. "This looks generic," she muttered, not to Madison, but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Madison blinked. "It's from my doctor," she said softly. Lana didn't answer. She held the inhaler up to the light, squinting, then lowered it and let out a short, dismissive breath. "Real prescriptions don't usually come in packaging like this," she said, this time with more volume. The man in the gray hoodie behind Madison looked up. A woman seated across from the counter stopped scrolling her phone. Little ripples of attention began forming, just beneath the surface. Lana's voice took on the tone people use when they've already made up their minds. "I've worked this gate for 17 years, she said. "I know what medical pre-boards look like. This doesn't add up." Madison shifted her weight slightly, but she didn't retreat. She reached into her small travel folder and pulled out a letter, printed on hospital letterhead, signed by her doctor, with a full asthma diagnosis and instructions for pre-boarding accommodations. Lana didn't even take it. She looked at the envelope and shook her head. "Anybody with a printer can fake that," she said. "And trust me, they do." That was the moment Madison understood. This wasn't about medicine. This wasn't even about protocol. This was about perception. To Lana, she didn't look like someone who should be boarding first. She didn't look sick enough. She didn't look scared enough. And, though it was never said out loud, she didn't look like the kind of child who gets believed. Not here. Not today. Not at gate 19. The sound her inhaler made when it hit the bottom of the trash can wasn't loud. It wasn't a crash or a clang. It was a soft, hollow thud. But it echoed. Across gate 19, conversations slowed. Phones lowered. A barista paused mid-swipe on the cafe register. Even the woman trying to soothe her crying toddler turned her head. People noticed, not just what happened but how it felt. The air changed. A teenager sitting by the window blinked twice and pressed record on her phone. "This is wild," she whispered to no one in particular. She just threw away that kid's medicine. In the corner, Tyree Sloan, a 22-year-old digital content creator with nearly 500,000 TikTok followers, had been watching from the start. He hadn't planned on filming. He was heading back to New York after covering a social justice summit in Oakland. But the moment that inhaler hit the bin, his instincts kicked in. He opened his front-facing camera and started recording. "Yo," he said into the lens. "Lex. Delta Airlines." A flight attendant just threw away a little black girl's asthma inhaler because she didn't look sick enough. "Let's make sure this doesn't disappear." By the time his third sentence left his mouth, over 400 people were watching live. Back at the gate, Lana remained calm, almost smug. She crossed her arms and stepped back from the counter like her work was done. Madison remained still. She hadn't said a word since the inhaler was tossed. But she didn't need to. The silence said enough. A businessman in a navy suit leaned over to the woman next to him and said, "Is this for real?" The woman, a mother of 3 traveling with her youngest, nodded. "It's disgusting." Another bystander walked up and asked, "Is everything okay here?" Lana didn't answer. She just gave a thin smile and said, "We're following airline procedures." But procedures don't usually get recorded by dozens of smartphones at once. And the comment section under Tyree's livestream was already flooding. Tag CNN. Where's her inhaler? That's child endangerment. A few comments questioned the girl's story. But most, overwhelmingly, knew what they were seeing. They were witnessing bias unfold in real time. They were watching a child be denied care, not because of paperwork, but because someone decided she didn't fit the picture of what sick looks like. And the internet. It had just entered gate 19. By now, it was no longer just a quiet moment. It was a full scene. Phones were up. Comments were flying across live streams. And in the center of it all, a child stood alone, still breathing carefully, still without her inhaler. That's when Lana waved over security. She did it with the dramatic flair of someone who wanted to be seen doing it. A single sweeping motion of the hand, like she was summoning backup in a courtroom. "Officer Jacobs," she called out, her voice cutting through the growing hum. "We may have a situation." Ron Jacobs was part of LAX internal airport security. Late 30s. Tall, clean-shaven, radio clipped tight to his shoulder. He walked over with a neutral expression, but the weight of his uniform added pressure before he even said a word. "What's going on here?" he asked. Lana didn't hesitate. This minor tried to pre-board under the claim of a medical condition, she explained, pointing to the trash can like it contained a bomb. But she presented a suspicious-looking device and couldn't provide proper medical documentation. I believe she may be attempting to bypass standard boarding procedures. Ron looked down at Madison. She was small, calm, still. But she didn't look scared. She looked tired. Madison reached into her folder again. This time, she pulled out a full medical file, diagnosis papers, ER visit summaries, allergy reports, and a doctor's letter on official Mount Sinai letterhead. She held them out. Ron flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. "This all looks pretty thorough," he said. Lana leaned in. "You'd be amazed what kids can fake with the internet these days." Behind them, the crowd grew louder. "I'm sorry," a voice called from the back. "Did she say fake?" "That's a kid's hospital file." More passengers started stepping closer. Tyree's livestream viewer count had just passed 18,000. Ron handed the papers back to Madison, slower this time. "Do you have ID?" he asked. Madison nodded and pulled out her school ID. "And my father's business card," she added. Ron looked at the card. The logo said Cole Capital Group. He knew that name. "I think," Madison said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you should call your supervisor." The temperature in the terminal dropped, not literally, but in the way people shifted, realizing they might be watching something much bigger than a boarding dispute. Because it was no longer about paperwork. It was about what happened when power met prejudice, and the wrong person's child was caught in the middle. Lana didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The prejudice wasn't loud, it was precise. It showed in the way she looked at Madison like she was a puzzle missing a few pieces. The kind of gaze that wasn't concerned with facts, only with assumptions. And the more Madison tried to explain herself, the more Lana's tone hardened, not from lack of understanding, but from refusal to see her as credible. "I'm just saying," Lana said, speaking now to the growing audience around the gate, "real sick kids don't travel alone. And definitely not in first class." That line landed like a slap. A woman 2 rows back shook her head. A man muttered, "Did she just say that out loud?" Madison said nothing. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. But the stillness in her body was louder than any protest. It was the silence of someone who had been here before. Lana leaned into it. "Every week," she continued, "someone tries to skip the line. I've seen it all. Fancy clothes, emotional stories, borrowed inhalers. You learn to spot what's real." Her words weren't aimed at Madison anymore. They were aimed at the crowd. She was building a case in public, layering judgment over protocol. She gestured toward Madison's designer carry-on. "She's dressed like she's going to a board meeting, not flying alone with a medical condition. First class is for people who..." She stopped herself. But everyone knew what she was going to say. The sentence didn't need to be finished. It was already out there. First class is for people who don't look like her. And just like that, the subtlety was gone. What had been careful and coded was now plain. This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about Delta's policy. It was about disbelief. About a worldview that could not compute the idea of a young black girl traveling alone in first class with a name-brand suitcase and a perfectly pressed blazer. And that disbelief had turned into something dangerous. Because when people in power start believing their biases are policy, children pay the price. And Madison? She was still standing. Still breathing. Barely. Still waiting for someone in that airport to believe she belonged. It came down to a single text. No hashtags. No comments. No back and forth. Just 5 words, sitting on Madison's lock screen. "Stay calm. I'm on it." That was all her father needed to say. Michael Cole didn't speak in panic. He didn't use exclamation points. His words were measured, intentional, like everything else he'd built from the ground up. His company. His reputation. His daughter. Madison read the message once. Then again. Then she tucked her phone back into her jacket, stood straighter, and looked up at Officer Jacobs. "You should call your supervisor," she repeated, this time with weight behind her voice. The officer hesitated. Maybe it was the way she spoke, not like a kid, but like someone used to getting answers. Maybe it was the collective hush of passengers now fully tuned in. Or maybe it was the name on the business card still burning a hole in his chest pocket. Jacobs reached for his radio. Gate 19 requesting supervisor, he said quietly. Possible guest relations escalation. Lana folded her arms. Oh, come on, she snapped. We're really calling in execs over a kid with an attitude and a fake inhaler? A few passengers turned toward her with disbelief. Someone whispered, "She's still talking?" That's when the screen behind the gate counter flickered. It didn't flash red or sound alarms. Just a subtle shift, text appeared in bold across the top line of the employee dashboard. Priority alert. Cold case. Comms team monitoring. Executive escalation in progress. Kevin, the junior gate agent who'd been quietly scanning documents nearby, froze mid-keystroke. He'd never seen that phrase before. Lana, he said, voice lower now. You might want to take a look at this. She leaned over, annoyed, and then went still. That was the moment the temperature changed. Not in the air, but in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, like something big was moving in. Across the gate, Tyree's TikTok live shot past 37,000 viewers. Comments exploded with mentions of Michael Cole. People were Googling him in real time. Screenshots of the incident were making their way to Twitter. And Madison? She sat down, composed. Her legs crossed, her eyes steady. Because she knew what came next. When your father builds empires, he doesn't knock. He enters. The alert spread faster than rumors ever could. It started with one line of text on the employee dashboard. Then it reached the internal app used by Delta Ground Operations. Then it pinged the phones of mid-level supervisors in the LAX terminal. Cold case, Gate 19, priority level 3. Within 3 minutes, the chain of command was fully engaged. Supervisors stopped mid-coffee. Internal group chats lit up with questions. Is this the Michael Cole? CEO Michael Cole? Whose daughter? A team lead from Gate 21 stepped into the hallway and quietly called upstairs. Yeah, we got a developing situation here. You'll want to get down here. Now. Meanwhile, back at Gate 19, the energy had shifted. The gate agents no longer looked annoyed. They looked alert, focused, nervous. Kevin's hands hovered above his keyboard, unsure what to do. Tyree's TikTok livestream had now passed 52,000 viewers. Comments flooded in from every time zone. Delta's about to fumble this hard. Do they know who she is? Michael Cole has lawyers on speed dial. Screenshots were being posted to Twitter. Madison's image, sitting quietly, legs crossed, hands folded, was becoming symbolic. A child alone, surrounded by adults who had underestimated her. And then the public relations team got the notification. A trending incident. Real-time video. High-profile family. They activated protocol. Media monitoring was now tracking all social platforms. Local newsrooms received calls from tipsters within the hour. LAX communications staff flagged the situation for executive review. Inside the terminal, the Delta manager on duty, Anita Flores, hustled down the corridor, her radio buzzing with conflicting reports. Gate 19, she said into her mic, I need status right now. She turned the corner and saw the crowd. Saw the passengers. The cameras. The trash can. The girl. Saw Lana Graham standing like nothing was wrong. And saw Madison, still seated, still waiting. Anita walked up and said nothing at first. Just looked. Read the room. Checked the energy. Then she turned to Lana and said, step away from the counter. Lana opened her mouth to protest, but stopped when Anita added, now. The system hadn't fully shifted. Not yet. But for the first time since the inhaler hit the bottom of that trash can, someone in uniform spoke with the right kind of authority. Someone looked at Madison and saw a child, not a threat. Not a fraud. Just a child, waiting to be treated like she belonged. The private jet touched down at LAX exactly 38 minutes after Madison sent her message. No delays. No layovers. Just precision. Michael Cole didn't waste time. Inside the terminal, people still didn't know what was coming. But they could feel it. That shift in air pressure. That electricity before a storm. Even those with no idea who Madison's father was started paying closer attention. Tyree's livestream had passed 83,000 viewers. One clip of Lana tossing the inhaler had already been reposted on Twitter more than 12,000 times. News vans were en route. Delta's executive hotline had been lit up for the last 20 minutes. Then the glass doors at the security checkpoint slid open. And in walked Michael Cole. No entourage. No cameras. Just presence. 6'2". Tailored gray suit. Sharp black tie. Shoes that barely made a sound on the tile floor. His expression was unreadable, but there was nothing casual about his pace. Flanking him were two attorneys, Jessica Pruitt, a civil rights powerhouse from Chicago, and Tom Delgado, Delta's worst nightmare when it came to corporate litigation. Together, they walked like a verdict. Madison saw him first. She didn't run, didn't shout. She just stood, calmly, and straightened her blazer. And Michael? He smiled, just for a second. You could? He asked. Madison nodded. I'm okay now. He looked past her, past the cluster of staff and security, to the woman still standing behind the Delta counter. You're Lana Graham? He asked flatly. Lana blinked, caught off guard. Yes. Michael didn't let her finish. I watched everything from the jet, he said. I watched you toss my daughter's medication in the trash. I watched you call her a liar. I watched you let her sit here without help, surrounded by suspicion. He turned to the supervisor, Anita Flores, who stood stiffly nearby. I'd like to speak to your director. And I'd like to see a copy of Delta's official protocol for handling unaccompanied minors with medical conditions. Because from what I witnessed, it looks like your protocol is called racial profiling. No one argued. No one even breathed. Because when Michael Cole arrived, the guessing stopped. And accountability finally walked through the door. Michael Cole wasn't there for a press conference. He wasn't there for apologies. He was there for change. By the time Delta's regional director, Melissa Conway, arrived at Gate 19, Michael and his attorneys were already reviewing documents at a makeshift table in the VIP lounge nearby. The gate had been temporarily closed to the public. Boarding was paused. Staff were repositioned. But the damage was still unfolding online. Melissa entered briskly, offering a corporate smile that didn't reach her eyes. She extended a hand. Michael didn't take it. I appreciate your urgency, he said. Now let's talk solutions. He opened a slim black folder and pulled out a typed list. Jessica Pruitt slid a matching copy across the table. We're not here to debate facts, she said. We're here to correct a culture. Tom Delgado added, what happened to Madison is not an isolated mistake. It's a symptom. Michael read from the page in front of him, his voice steady. We're demanding the following. 1. Immediate termination of all personnel involved in this incident, including the gate agent, Lana Graham. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but Michael kept going. 2. Mandatory unconscious bias and racial sensitivity training for all Delta customer-facing employees, quarterly, with third-party certification. 3. A real-time AI monitoring system to flag discriminatory behavior based on tone, delay patterns, or boarding denials, implemented within 60 days. 4. A public apology to Madison and our family, delivered by Delta's CEO, with a commitment to policy transparency moving forward. 5. Creation of a customer protection advocate role at the executive level, reporting directly to the board, with the power to investigate bias-related incidents independently. Jessica leaned forward. 6. Delta will fund a $2 million scholarship initiative for young black girls with chronic health conditions who aspire to travel and lead. The program will bear Madison's name. Melissa looked pale. That's a lot to process. Michael leaned in slightly. Not as much as watching my daughter be humiliated in front of thousands, while she struggled to breathe and no one helped. Silence settled. Then Melissa nodded slowly. I'll take this to the executive board immediately. You have 24 hours, Michael said, rising from his chair. After that, we go public with everything. And you know what a public discrimination case tied to a minor looks like on Wall Street. He didn't say it with anger. He said it like a man who had won this kind of battle before, and knew exactly how it would end. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of Michael Cole's demands, Delta's corporate headquarters had called an emergency board meeting. Legal teams reviewed live footage, media backlash, and social sentiment reports. By the end of the day, the company's stock had dipped nearly 3%, triggered not by financial performance, but by public outrage. The decision was unanimous. By 7 a.m. the next morning, Delta Airlines released an official statement on every major platform. It opened with 2 words, "We failed." The statement went on to confirm the termination of Lana Graham, citing gross misconduct and violation of protocol concerning unaccompanied minors and medical emergencies. It acknowledged that Madison Cole had been wrongfully denied assistance, her prescription medication discarded, and her dignity compromised. But the consequences extended beyond press releases. Delta's CEO personally called Michael Cole. He didn't lead with excuses. He led with an apology. "We are implementing every reform you requested," he said. "Not just to protect your daughter, but to protect the next child who walks into one of our gates." By noon, a follow-up announcement revealed the creation of the Madison Cole Initiative, a scholarship and mentorship fund aimed at empowering young Black girls with chronic health conditions to travel, explore, and lead without fear of judgment or denial. The fund was seeded with $2 million and would be expanded through corporate partnerships. The gate agents who had stayed silent during the incident were retrained. Officer Jacobs, who had hesitated but never escalated, requested to join the Internal Equity Task Force. Lonan never spoke publicly, but her name became synonymous with a hard lesson: that bias, when unchecked, becomes action, and action, when unjust, has consequences. As for Madison, she boarded a new flight to New York, first class of course, accompanied by an airline representative trained specifically for passenger dignity support. Passengers clapped quietly as she walked onto the plane. Not because she'd made a scene, but because she didn't. She stood her ground. She carried herself with the calm confidence her father had raised her to embody. And she reminded the world that justice doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes, it enters quietly, with a child who knows her worth. And a father who refuses to let the world forget it. A few weeks later, Madison stood on a stage at a youth leadership summit in Washington, D.C. The room was filled with students, educators, and mentors. Hundreds of young voices gathered to talk about justice, courage, and the future. The banner behind her read "Dignity in Action, Leading Through Adversity." She wasn't the loudest speaker that day. She didn't need to be. Her presence carried weight. And when she stepped up to the microphone, she began with a moment of silence. A pause long enough to make the room lean in. Then she spoke, clearly and without apology. "When a flight attendant threw away my medicine," Madison said, "she wasn't just tossing a plastic inhaler in the trash. She was tossing the idea that I belonged there." The room went still. She decided, in that moment, that my health didn't matter. That my words weren't credible. That someone like me, traveling alone, in first class, had to be lying. She paused again. Not for effect, but for truth. But what she didn't know is that dignity is not something other people give you. It's something you carry. And when you carry it well enough, long enough, you can make people rethink everything they thought they knew about someone like you. The crowd rose to their feet in quiet applause. That moment, like the one at Gate 19, was not about revenge. It was about responsibility. About raising the standard of how we treat people, especially when we think no one is watching. Because someone always is. The lesson in Madison's story isn't just about race, class, or boarding groups. It's about something bigger. It's about how easily we dismiss what we don't expect. How quickly we question those who don't fit a stereotype. And how dangerous it becomes when bias hides behind professionalism. So now, we ask you, have you ever seen someone mistreated just because of how they looked? Have you ever felt small in a place where you were supposed to belong? Tell your story. Comment below. Let your voice be part of something louder. And if you believe dignity should never be denied based on skin color, age, or perceived status, then hit that like button. Share this video. Subscribe to Black Voices Uncut, where we turn real stories into real change. Because what happened to Madison didn't end at Gate 19. It sparked something bigger. And your voice could be the next one to lead it forward.